Sure, I'm glad to see the sunshine after that beautiful day we had yesterday. Do we have any visitors here today? We have a tear off in our bulletin, if you will and want to. Just give us a little information, fill it out, and put it in the offering plate. And we are still collecting paper towels, bathroom tissue, and liquid laundry detergent for the Christian Center of Concern. And the Souls at Stake Evangelism Rally will be Sunday, April the 29th at 5:30 at Berry Baptist Church. And Miss Debbie Ham wanted me to announce that the ladies that are going to the Women of Joy, we need to meet right after services today, please. And birthdays, April the 15th is Justin Franklin. April the 18th is Joe Beasley and Derek Morgan. April the 20th is April Mayfield. And anniversaries, April the 18th is Gordon and Kim Airy. And April the 21st is Hunter and, according to Mike Galloway, Donta Sexton. I haven't done that since Mike was here. Do we have any other announcements? Choir practice after services tonight. And we need to we have a lot of prayer requests today, but our leader of our church is having back surgery May the 2nd, correct? May the 2nd. Y'all please be praying for Brother Will. We all need to help him out during his 4 to 6 weeks of recovery. Anybody got anything else? Brother Tommy, would you like to say a word this morning?
Oh, thanks so much, Mr. Bill, for taking us from your house. Thank you for your prayers for us in the storms. Oh, with the people that was affected, it's still going on this morning. Lord, I should speak with the Will this morning, to bring a message. Just touch someone here, Lord, from my side, that are coming down here today. Lord, just be with our church. Amen.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. All right, let's stand together. Brother Will's been preaching a couple of times on the assurance of our salvation. So this morning, 334, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Everybody got that blessed assurance this morning? Let's sing together.
This is my story. This is my
I can see it fluttering around in here this morning. Sweet, sweet spirit. There's a sweet, sweet spirit in this place, and I know it's the spirit of the Lord. There are sweet expressions on each face, and I know it's the presence of the Lord. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, you're right here with us, filling us with your love. And for these blessings, we lift our hearts in praise. Without a doubt, we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. There are blessings you cannot receive till you know Him in His fullness and believe. You're the one to offer when you say, I am going to walk with Jesus all the way. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, you're right here with us, filling us with your love. And for these blessings, we lift our hearts in praise. Without a doubt, we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. Number 484. 484, higher ground. I press on toward the goal to win the prize in Christ Jesus. Are you pressing on this morning? Higher ground. Higher ground. I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand. My faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. My heart has known these are to stay, where doubts surprise and fears dismay. Though some may dwell where these are bound, my prayer I aim is higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand. My faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the utmost high and catch a gleam of glory ride, but still I'll pray till heaven I found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand. My faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
Lord, thank you for another day of life. Thank you for allowing us to come out of your house and worship you. Thank you for the songs that we just heard. Be with Brother Will today. Arrange the message. Be with this offering. Be with us. We'll go out throughout the day and bring it back tonight. I pray.
'Cause you're always the same, and if I offering to you, I bring your name is Jesus. Your name is Jesus. You're the wonderful Counselor, my friend. You're what I hold on to. I know that you brought me through all the days of lost to the cross you knew. I need a Savior. How many songs can I sing to bring your wondrous love and beauty so great? Oh, and what would I say if you brought down rain? Or if every day walk through the pain, you still say, your name is Jesus. Your name is Jesus. You're the wonderful Counselor, my friend. You're all I hold on to. I know that you brought me through all the days of lost to the cross you I need a Savior. When I need a I know that you brought me through days of lost to the cross you I need a Savior. I need a Savior. I need you, Savior.
Come on, youngins.
see everybody today. I want to invite you to open up to the book of Revelation, chapter 13. Revelation, chapter 13 today. We took a break last week. Somebody asked me after church last Sunday if we were done with Revelation. We got a ways to go. But the best stuff is still ahead of us. Revelation chapter 13. I want to start with this. I want to talk a little bit for just a minute about truth, the element of truth. In our culture, truth is a bad word nowadays. Would you agree with that? Truth is a bad word. And in our society, to be thought of as a noble, loving, kind, honorable person, you have to be willing to intellectually stoop down to the point that you accept that truth is what other people want it to be. People's feelings are more important than the truth. People's sense of self-worth is more important than the truth. People's sense of our desire to belong and feeling accepted, that's all more important than the truth, and so truth has to take a back seat. That's where we're at today in our culture. And it doesn't surprise me that that goes on in the world, but what does surprise me is that it's becoming that way more and more in many churches. That is the shocking thing. I listened to a conversation on the radio this week where they were discussing the increasing acceptance of homosexuality and transgenderism in churches. How many of you ever thought you'd hear that would be accepted in the church? They talked about a situation where in one church there was a baby dedication, and the parents asked the pastor to refer to their child as he or she in his speech so that they could make their point that they wanted their child to grow up to be whatever gender the child wanted to be. And even though that is an impossibility, you're either XX or XY, right? Even though that is the case, the pastor still agreed to do it because to him, he thought that those parents' feelings was more important than the truth. They discussed the increasing amount of denominations that are accepting homosexuality as a lifestyle, and that some of them not only just do they accept it, but they endorse it by allowing homosexuals to enter into places of leadership in the church. They talked about a situation where there are churches that are offering classes for homosexual couples that have adopted children, offering them parenting classes, counseling classes. And they spoke of a homosexual church leader that was interviewed and asked this question: how can you say that you believe the Bible when the Bible condemns homosexuality as a sin? That's a pretty straightforward question. And his answer was, well, I don't claim to have all the answers. All I know is that the secret things belong to the Lord. That's what you call a cop-out. There are secret things that the Lord has not revealed to us, but that ain't one of them. Amen? God couldn't be any more clear on that. What all of this comes down to is that churches and their leaders have compromised. That's simply what it comes down to. People, they want to be in the in crowd. The in crowd is the politically correct crowd. And the politically correct crowd today is now the morally incorrect crowd. And churches are joining that crowd, and to do so they are required to abandon the authoritative book of truth called the Bible. That's the only way you can join that crowd, is if you abandon that truth. To them, it's not the truth that matters, it's people's feelings and people's personal agendas that matter. And people stand up and say, well, look, give them a break. You know, they're not hurting anybody. They're happy people. What's the problem? The problem is this. When a person dies and stands before God at judgment, it will not be their feelings that matter. And it will not be their personal agendas that matter. There will be one agenda that matters, and that is God's agenda. And God's agenda is a truth agenda. And He has spelled out His agenda word for word in this book. And any person who has rejected the truth in this book will spend their eternity in hell. That is why truth matters. And that is why we cannot compromise, and that is why we cannot back down from the truth. Now, here's another thing to think about.
this is also one of the most evil people in the world, the most destructive and dangerous people in the world. They're not dictators, and they're not terrorists, and they're not criminals. The most evil people in the world, they don't carry around weapons, they carry around religious books. And they don't dress in combat uniform, they dress in religious uniform. And you don't find them in a dictator's palace or in a prison cell, you find them behind pulpits. The most dangerous, evil, destructive people on planet Earth are people who take the truth and twist it and use it to deceive people and lead people astray. In 2 Peter and Jude, it makes it very clear that the people for whom God has reserved the most severe wrath are false teachers. You know, it seems like every time there's a school shooting or something like that, people will say, well, the hottest hell is reserved for them, and I'm not taking away from how evil those kinds of things are, but don't misunderstand it. The hottest hell, if you will, is reserved for false teachers. Here's why. They don't cause temporary suffering on earth. They cause eternal suffering in hell. Just to give you an idea of how God views false teachers, 2 Peter 2:13-14. Speaking of false teachers, they count it a pleasure to revel in the daytime. They are stains and blemishes, reveling in their deceptions as they carouse with you, having eyes full of adultery that never cease from sin, enticing unstable souls, having a heart trained in greed, they are accursed. He goes on in verse 18 and 19 and says, for speaking out arrogant words of vanity, they entice by fleshly desires, by sensuality, those who barely escape from the ones who live in error, promising them freedom while they themselves are slaves of corruption. For the false teacher, their game is a game of deception. You know, when you see them, they come across as harmless. But that's what Jesus said. He said, look, they come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous, vicious, destructive, dangerous wolves. That's what they do. With their deception, they lure people astray. And do you think we have a shortage of them today? I don't think so at all. You know, what we have to remember that the false teachers are not just the Joel Osteens and the Kim Sheltons and the Benjamin Hinds and those guys. They're all over the place. They're everywhere. There never has been, nor will there ever be a shortage of false teachers. But what we're going to see today in the book of Revelation is the greatest, most effective false teacher that this world has ever or will ever see. During the tribulation, there's a certain false teacher that's going to rise up, and he's going to be the right-hand man of Antichrist. He is going to come alongside the Antichrist, and he is going to deceive the world into believing that Antichrist is God, and he is going to cause the world to worship Antichrist, and in so doing, he'll lead millions of people to hell. Now, I know, like I said, we haven't been in Revelation for a couple of weeks, so I want to catch you up to speed on what's going on. We spent several weeks from chapters 5 to 11 looking at the tribulation. We looked at the seal judgments, and we looked at 6 out of the 7 trumpet judgments. And just to remind you, in each of those judgments, God is unleashing His wrath on this planet, preparing it to give it back to the rightful owner, Jesus Christ. You come to the end of chapter 11, and the 7th trumpet is sounded, and that 7th trumpet is going to open up to the 7 bold judgments, but before God describes to us what those bold judgments are, He, in a sense, hits the pause button, and He shifts the focus. Up to this point, we have been seeing what God is going to do in the world during the tribulation. When you come to chapter 12, God stops and says, okay, well, here's what Satan and Antichrist is going to be doing in the world during the tribulation. When you come to chapter 12, you see where Satan is going to lead Antichrist to unleash this massive persecution against the Jews. It's going to be a worldwide slaughtering of Jews. And you may ask, why would Antichrist want to kill the Jews? Well, remember, God made a promise that in the end He would redeem the Jews as a people. Well, Satan knows that if he can kill the Jews, there will be no Jews for God to redeem, and in so doing, he will have made God out to be a liar. That is exactly why throughout history there has been no people group that have been so attacked as the Jews. Satan has been behind every bit of that.
And it'll be no different at the end of the world. At the end of the world, during the tribulation, there will be this massive persecution unleashed against the Jews. And we learned that Antichrist will actually destroy 2/3 of the Jewish population. But God keeps His word, amen? He will preserve a 1/3 remnant of those Jews alive. How's He going to do that? We learn in this passage that there's going to be a safe haven that God has prepared for them in the wilderness. Where is that at? We don't know. It doesn't tell us. People speculate, but we can't know for sure. All we know is that He will lead the Jews out to this safe haven, and while they're there, God will supernaturally protect them, and He will supernaturally provide for them. And in so doing, He will have successfully preserved that 1/3 remnant of the Jews alive. Then you come to chapter 13. And in the first half of chapter 13, you get kind of a biography of the Antichrist. Who he is, what He's going to be doing. If you missed that, you really missed out, because Colton showed to us his gold and his iron and his bronze and silver and all that. But to put it simple, at the end of the world, there's going to be these 10 nations that are going to come together. They are going to align themselves under Antichrist. You learn from Daniel's prophecy that these 10 nations, they will be a revived Roman Empire. They will become one massive world power ruled by Antichrist. So there is Antichrist at the end of the world. He has all the military power under his belt. He has all the political power under his belt. But remember that what he's ultimately after is to get all the religious power under his belt. What he ultimately wants is for the world to be worshiping him as God. To help him accomplish that, that is where this false preacher comes in. Satan rises up, this false preacher, to aid Antichrist in deceiving the world into believing that he is God. Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. When you get it, say got it. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. Now remember, the dragon represents who? Satan. The first beast is Antichrist, and this second beast is this false preacher. Now I want you to notice a couple different things here. Is Antichrist Satan? No. Is Antichrist a demon? No. Antichrist is a human being. He becomes possessed by a demon. More specifically, he becomes possessed by Satan himself. He is under the direct control of Satan. Now, it's the same way with this false preacher. This false preacher is not Satan. He's not a demon. He is a human being. He's a man. He will have already been a false preacher in this world. He will already be on the world stage of false religion. But at a certain point in the tribulation, Satan will possess him, control him, and use him for his own purposes. Now, notice the language used here. Remember, this is symbolic language. This false preacher does not literally have 2 horns, and he's not literally a lamb. This is symbolic here. Notice the difference between the language used to describe the false preacher and Antichrist. Remember, Antichrist, he has how many horns? He has 10 horns, and on those horns are 10 crowns, and he has 7 heads, and on those 7 heads, 7 blasphemous names. Well, this false preacher, he's just got 2 horns. Also, if you go back to chapter 13, verse 2, Antichrist is described as a leopard, a bear, a lion. The false preacher, he's described as a lamb. What's the point? The point is they're a lot different in the sense that Antichrist, he's fierce, he's frightening, he's powerful. Whereas this false preacher, he's just harmless, looking as a lamb. He appears to be innocent. He's meek, he's mild, he's gentle, he's smooth talking. He will appear to have good, pure intentions. But as harmless and innocent as this false preacher appears to be, it says that he will speak as a what? As a dragon. And remember, the dragon represents Satan. So it's saying that he will speak like Satan. What does that mean then? It means that just like Antichrist, this false preacher will be Satan's mouthpiece. When this false preacher opens his mouth to speak, it would be as if you handed a microphone to Satan, and Satan speaks, but the sound, the words, the noise is coming out of the mouth of this false preacher. Satan will, through this false preacher, unleash his religious lies into this world, and these are lies that will send millions of people to hell. But as awful as these lies are, you know what the crazy thing is? The world is going to love every bit of it. The world, to them, it'll be sweet as honey. Because Satan is going to be speaking these lies through this false preacher. And this false preacher, again, he's as harmless as a lamb. He's smooth talking. He's innocent looking. It goes on to verse 12, and it says that this false preacher exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. Now we learn two things from that. First of all, this false preacher exercises all the authority of the first beast of Antichrist, meaning this: the same power, the same authority, the same force that the Antichrist has is the same authority, power, and force that the false preacher has. But it says that the false preacher can only exercise his authority in the presence of Antichrist. What does that tell you? That's just reminding us that don't get it twisted. This false preacher is not running the show here. All right? He's not the main man. Antichrist is the main man. He's just the sidekick. That's all he is. This false preacher is simply there to advance, to support, to benefit the cause, the mission of Antichrist. Now, he tells us exactly what the false preacher's mission is. He goes on into middle of verse 12. It says that the false preacher makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship Antichrist. In other words, you can think of it like this: he is the Antichrist's PR guy. That's what he is. He is there to deceive the world into believing that Antichrist is God, so that the world will worship him as God. That's all he is there for. Now, that's not a small task, is it? You know, to deceive somebody into believing that somebody is God is no small task. So how's he going to accomplish that? He'll do it with Satan's help. The first thing he does, and this is something we already talked about, into verse 12, it speaks of how Antichrist's fatal wound was what? Healed. Go back to chapter 13 and verse 3. Speaking of Antichrist, it says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. Now, a fatal wound is a wound that you do or do not survive. You do not survive it, all right? Now, I shared with you my take on this, and for those of you that weren't here or forgot, I'll share it with you again. There's only two options here. Either this is Satan raising Antichrist from the dead, or this is God raising Antichrist from the dead, or this is a fake death and a fake resurrection. There is zero evidence in the Bible that Satan can give life. That Satan can raise the dead. That happens zero in the Bible. There's one person that can give life, and that's God. So now it comes down to only two possibilities. Either God is raising him from the dead, or something else is going on. Now, my theology will not allow me to believe that God raises a blasphemer from the dead for that blasphemer to go and continue in his blasphemy. My theology won't let me go there. On top of that, Antichrist will be, other than Satan, the greatest deceiver the world has ever seen. So it makes sense to me then that with Satan's help, Antichrist is able to stage a fake death and stage a phony resurrection. And in so doing, there's only one person that can conquer death. That's God. And he will, with this phony resurrection, deceive the world into believing that he is God. And that is something that this false preacher is going to point to. He's going to arise onto the stage of the world, and he's going to say, look, y'all, this man has conquered death. There's only one person that can conquer death, and that's God. Antichrist conquered death, so then he must be God. And he does something else. Look at verse 13. It says that the false preacher performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast. Now, this is an old trick in Satan's book. Do you remember back in Exodus, and I'm just going to paraphrase this, do you remember when Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, look, you've got to let God's people go. And God told me to tell you that if you don't let these people go, you are going to pay. And so Pharaoh's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but how do I know you're really speaking on God's behalf? If you're really speaking on God's behalf, prove it. Do some kind of miracle that will validate that you are really speaking on God's behalf. And what happened? Moses, empowered by God, would do a miracle. But then, what happened then? Pharaoh's magicians would copy that miracle. Now, who do you think empowered their magic? Satan did. Satan was copycatting God's miracles to deceive people. Now, Satan was doing that all the way back then, and he'll be doing that all the way at the end of the world. 2,000 years ago, people said, okay, Jesus, how do we know that you're God? Prove to us that you're God. How did Jesus do that? Not only did he heal the sick and raise the dead and walk on water and control the weather and cast out demons and all that, he raised himself from the dead. That's something only God can do. So, in the world, Satan, with Antichrist, fabricates a phony resurrection. He's copycatting God's greatest miracle God ever did, deceiving the world. Now here in verse 13, you see him doing the same thing. One of the things that this false preacher is able to do is he's able to make what come down out of the sky? Fire. Now go back, remember chapter 11. God sends the two preachers to this earth. We believe them to be Moses and Elijah. People are like, okay, how do we know y'all are really speaking on God's behalf? God gives them miracles to validate the message that they're preaching, right? They're able to make it so that it couldn't rain. And another thing is when people come to attack them and kill them, these preachers are able to breathe fire out of their mouth and burn their attackers alive. Thus validating that, yeah, these guys are definitely speaking on God's behalf because look at what they're able to do. Well, now here is Satan deceiving the world with this false preacher because he enables the false preacher to, again, copycat God's miracles to deceive the world. Now, Satan initiates another one of his old tactics here. Satan has always had a thing for statues, images, idols. He's always used statues and idols to help stir people in their worship of their false god. Look at the end of verse 14. It says that the false preacher begins to tell those who dwell on the earth to make an image to Antichrist, who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. Verse 15, and it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak. You know, this world is as sophisticated as it has ever been. But as sophisticated as this world will continue to be, there's some things that just never change. Unregenerate humanity will always want there to be some God other than the true God. It'll be no different at the end of the world, just like in the days of Moses and all the way back. There will still be idolatry to further fuel and further establish the worship of Antichrist. This false preacher will initiate the making of this great statue made in the likeness of Antichrist. Now, to me, in verse 14, it says he's telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast. So he's telling individual people, you make your own image of the beast, and then verse 15 is giving him to give breath to the image of the beast, referring to a singular image. So it seems to me that he's telling individuals to, in their own personal lives, have their own statue of Antichrist to worship. But then there's this singular great statue, probably at Jerusalem, where people come to worship it. And this statue will be unlike any other statue the world has ever seen, because it says that Satan gives to the false preacher the ability to give what to this statue? To give it breath and give it the ability to speak. Now I need you to take note of something real quick. In the New Testament, there are two Greek words used to describe life. Those are the words zoe and bios. Those words refer to life. The word here is the word pneuma, and it just means breath. I make that point because there are those who say that this statue becomes a living being, that it is given actual life. It's not a living being. It doesn't have life. It is given the appearance of life. It is given breath, even to the point that it can actually speak. It is miraculous, it is divine, and it will be used to deceive the world to believe even more that Antichrist is God. So the world's going to look at Antichrist and they're going to say, okay, first of all, he raised from the dead. Second of all, this false preacher has come along who's able to rain down fire from heaven and do these other miracles. And he is saying that Antichrist is God. And on top of that, there's a statue made in his likeness, and the thing can talk. It appears that the thing has life. The Antichrist has to be God. But the false preacher doesn't stop there. What is going to happen to people who refuse to worship the statue? Into verse 15, the false preacher will cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. This is every man, woman, all children, everybody will be ordered to bow their knee at the foot of this statue and say, Antichrist is the Lord God. And for those who refuse to do it, they will be put to death. There will be wives pleading with their husbands, and husbands pleading with their wives, and parents pleading with their children, and children pleading with their parents to just please acknowledge Antichrist as God because I don't want you to die. Now, there's only going to be one group of people refusing to do this, and who's that going to be? The Christians, right? The people that have been saved during the tribulation. They will refuse because they are not going to deny the Father before men, right? They're not going to do that. They are not ashamed of the gospel of Christ because this is the power of God unto salvation. And so they're going to be put to death. Now, do you think this is going to be these are going to be quick executions? Quick deaths? I don't think so. I think Antichrist is going to want to make an example out of these people. And so these will be brutal and public executions in order to get the word out. And there's something else that this false preacher does to enforce the worship of Antichrist. Look at verse 16. He causes all, the small, the great, the rich, the poor, free, slaves, he causes all people to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. And this is where you begin to see just how much control Antichrist has. If it says, if you're small or great in this world, in other words, if you're a somebody or a nobody or you're rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Every person will be ordered to pledge allegiance to Antichrist. And the people who have pledged allegiance to Antichrist, their allegiance to him will be made public how? The false preacher initiates the marking process. All those who have surrendered their lives to Antichrist, they will be given a mark on their forehead, easily visible, or on the top of their hand, easily visible. It doesn't tell us specifically what this mark will be. It just says that it will be either the name of Antichrist or the number of Antichrist's name. And without this mark, it says that you will not be able to buy and you won't be able to sell. So now Antichrist not only has military control, political control, religious control, now he also has economic control. Currency as we know it will be over. This will be a new world economy. You can forget doing a job, getting a paycheck, going to the bank, depositing. All that's over. Evidently, there's going to be some worldwide credit system. You'll have credit given to you. And the only way you can access your credit is through the mark that you receive on your forehead or on your hand. So this indicates to me that evidently this is something that is scanned. And once it's scanned, it enters into some kind of computer system, and there it is told how much credit you have, what you have to spend, and that is how people will buy and sell. That's how you'll get your food, your clothes, water, shelter, you name it. This is a dictatorship like we can't even imagine. The Antichrist government, he will control, he will dictate how much money people have. He will be able to keep track of what people buy, where they buy it, when they bought it. Not to mention, he'll be able to track and pinpoint people's exact location through the mark on their forehead or on their hand, just like today, we can be tracked by our cell phone. So Antichrist and his false preacher, they'll be pulling people in from both ways. The false preacher will say, okay, if you're not going to worship Antichrist willingly, I'm going to force your hand. You're going to receive this mark. And if you don't receive this mark, then you can't buy or sell. To receive this mark, you're going to have to worship Antichrist. And by the way, if you refuse to worship Antichrist, if you refuse to worship this statue, you will be put to death. So he will pull people in by spiritual willingness or by physical necessity, but either way, he'll be pulling people in. Now, here's the last thing. Verse 18. Now, I want to tell you, I don't know of anything in the book of Revelation that has stirred up as much controversy and as much silliness as this verse right here. Verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. How many of you have heard horror stories about 666? This is probably the most superstitious, silly thing that is used out of the book of Revelation. People have said, well, 666, it refers to this person or this event or this thing. I did some reading on some things that people say. One man said that with the number 666, we know that the Antichrist will come from Australia because, he says, Australia's national bank cards have the number 666 on them. Another guy said that the Antichrist will be a major shareholder in the Sears company because their transactions are prefixed with 666. And I think a lot of those are closing, aren't they? So here's my favorite one. This guy said that the Antichrist will come from the IRS because they have on their employee badges the number 666. All we know for sure is that this number 666 directly applies to the person, to the name of Antichrist. All right? If you want to know, if you want to know the answer to what it specifically means, write this down. I don't know, and you don't know, and neither does anybody else know until the Antichrist comes on the scene. Now, when he comes on the scene, then we will be able to know specifically what the 666 means. So really, verse 18, it's not really even intended for us. This warning is intended for people that are saved during the tribulation who are going to be looking for answers. And then they'll come to Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, and they'll see that and they'll say, ah! And they'll know exactly what it's talking about. But for us, we don't. So, to sum all this up, there is a new world religion coming. And it will be the most massive, it will be the most widespread, it will be the most dominating religion that this world has ever seen, and it will lead countless millions to hell. But please don't misunderstand this. This new world religion that is coming is no more dangerous and deadly than the false religion that is in this world today. This false preacher who is coming is no more deadly and dangerous than the false preachers who are already in this world today because they lead people to the same hell. Now, if you're here today and look, you've been to church and maybe you've been baptized and you prayed the sinner's prayer and all that, but you're not really born again. You're not truly saved. You don't truly have a relationship with God. I want to ask you this question. What religion are you in? What religion are you? Because everybody's in some kind of religion. Maybe your religion is the religion of salvation by works. You believe that by being a good person, that you're going to get to heaven, that you'll stand before God in judgment and He'll say, well, your good outweighs your bad, so come on in. Or maybe you're in the religion of no religion. Or maybe you're in the religion of you're one person on Sunday and another person on Monday. Or maybe you're in the religion that, well, I don't have to be all about Jesus to go to heaven. I can just be, He can just be a little part of my life and that's good enough. All of those things fall short of what it takes to go to heaven. What does it take to go to heaven? Romans 10:9, if you will confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord. There's no such thing as a Lord who does not have a slave. If you want to go to heaven, you've got to become the slave of Jesus Christ. You've got to surrender your life to Him. And you know what? It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter where you've been. He says, if you'll come to me, I will no way cast you out. I will not turn you away. All you who are weary and heavy laden, you come to me and I'll give you rest. You're on your way to hell now, but it doesn't have to stay that way. God loves you so much that He gave up His only begotten Son, that if you'll just believe in Him, give your life to Him, instead of perishing in hell, you'll have eternal life in heaven. The invitation today, respond to the love of God. Give your life to Him today and be saved. Father, thank you for this time that you've given us together today. And Lord, what a comfort it is to know that you are the God who declares the end from the beginning. That even from before the foundation of the world, you knew exactly everything that would take place. And Lord, if you're in control of what's going to happen way down the road, how dare we question or doubt you in our lives today? Lord, I pray that this study will help us to grow in our faith and our trust in you. But Lord, I also pray that this will help us to realize that we have to work the works of him who sent you as long as it is day. Lord, you're coming back any moment now. Help us to not be distracted. Help us to not get caught up in the silly things that this world has to offer. Help us to realize that this life is about so much more than jobs and money and houses and vacations and ball games. That we were created to worship you and to serve you. And for those who are here today that don't know you, I pray that they would feel your love for them, that they would see their need of you, and that they would respond to you today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Let's stand together. 329. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.